Thank you very much, my fellow panelists and distinguished audience. His Excellency Turner's discourse got me thinking. Years ago, I had read in one of the inner jackets of Sidney Sheldon novels that it went something like this: "Forgive me, mate, that we are underlings, that our fate is decided by the cosmic roll of the dice." So when we talk of propositions and we talk of the choices, we need to be cognizant of those trends and forces that are shaping this international order. So I have a structured discourse. You'll have to bear with me for a few minutes. The future international order is being defined by big power competition, digital revolution, and algorithm-driven technology. Kissinger writes that the two competing strains of international relations have kept struggling for ascendancy as the afterglow of post-Westphalian peace. The first strain harked back to the order and equilibrium begotten out of a politico-clerical symbiosis, predating the 30 Years' War in Europe that was challenged by a Protestant alliance. Second was a tendency to disturb that equilibrium. Now, the state interests and sovereignty were the dominant credo of international power politics when the new world order was ushered after the downfall of the Ottoman Empire. British statesman Lord Palmerston has this to say: "We have no eternal allies and we have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual, and those interests it is our duty to follow," embodied that credo. The three main reasons that ushered in the modern era of European political and scientific ascendancy included technological advancements, information revolution, and the Protestant Reformation that challenged the tyranny of papacy, ushering in a new era of socio-economic emancipation. The European balance of power concept, however, never fructified in the shape it was practiced in Europe, in the world dominated by United States of America. The United States geopolitical philosophy epitomized its founding fathers' vision and the pioneering settlers' thinking. Governor John Winthrop, while in a ship bound for the settlement of Massachusetts in 1630, had spoken of his vision for the New World as the city on the hill. According to Kissinger, the US notion of foreign policy was not the pursuit of specific interests, but the cultivation of shared interests. Now, this new political evangelism smacked surely of a new white man's burden. Those who shared the American political philosophy had to share their interests. Could you show? Okay, slides. Share those interests, otherwise they were in the opposite camp. A long Cold War and its eventual end confronted the world with the same dilemma that it had faced before the two world wars. Now, the choices for the rest of the world were external balancing through acceptance of a surrogate status to the United States, unless they were ready to countenance the reprisals of the United States super surrogates in different regions. There were some contrarian voices, like for instance Professor Stephen Walt. He gave the concept of offshore balancing based on rapidly deployable task forces and regional alliances instead of boots on the ground and costly armed interventions. The current international order in theory relates to Immanuel Kant's model of perpetual peace. Now, that is the theory part, but in practice, there is still a strong imprint of Hobbesian anarchic world conflating national interests with maximization of national power. Thomas Friedman, a champion of liberal internationalism, wrote about the advantages of globalization. In the world is flat, but the world is not so much flat. It has spikes of inequality. There were detractors like Piketty, who believed that globalization and capitalism in fact create wealth inequality, without which state intervention results in economic stratification and human deprivation. Current tendency of the leading global power, that is the United States of America, to use geopolitical competition as a tool to forestall or delay the rise of China as the global challenger to US-dominated international order, is threatening the equilibrium of global balance of power. Allison calls this the Thucydides trap. Now, while prognosticating a conflict scenario in the context of Sino-US rivalry for global dominance, Allison forgot a very perceptive saying of Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy for breakfast daily. Does United States culture of competition square with the Chinese notions of competition? The world must stand up and take note of these differences in cultural approaches to competition. Now, small wonder that in the absence of a moral leviathan, there are models which are being copied by the rest of the world in the shape of populism, xenophobia, ideologues, and we have seen rise of such populists in Argentina, Hungary, Philippines, India, and Brazil. Let's have a look on the Kissinger's conceptualization of the notion of a world order. No world order can be achieved by any country alone. To achieve a genuine world order, its components, while maintaining their own values, need to acquire a second culture that is global, structure, and juridical. A concept that transcends the perspective and ideals of any lone region or nation. At this moment in history, this would be a modernization of the Westphalian system informed by contemporary realities. Now, what are those realities? Coming to those realities, these realities are the common sufferings of the mankind. These are the same sufferings that those 200 delegates got together in 1648 at Westphalia to discuss, and then came up with a prescription for unity and state order. Now, the present day reincarnations of those horrors of 30 years war are the common problems of mankind. What are those common problems? These common problems include climate change, food insecurity, and the rest flashed on the slide. Now, the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres should ring alarm bells, who said while delivering the address in Sharm el-Sheikh COP27 conference, "Science is clear, any hope of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degree means achieving global net zero emissions by 2050, but that 1.5 degree goal is on the life support and the machines are rattling." Right, the issue of nuclear weapons use and proliferation has come in renewed focus despite non-proliferation and arms control realities due to introduction of new high-tech weaponry that include cyberspace, outer space use, artificial intelligence. Now, this has lowered the threshold. Artificial intelligence has made violence very tempting to use. So, this has its own challenges on the new international order. Henry Kissinger, again, the doyen of that policy formulation on international order, says, "The technology for wars has evolved faster than the political leadership's ability to grasp the strategic and philosophical implications of the machines and algorithms at their disposal." Now, here, like the age of faith was replaced by the age of enlightenment, the age of enlightenment nowadays is being replaced by the age of algorithms, where machines are talking to machines and reducing the human involvement. The algorithm-dependent wars with reduced human agency in initiation of the future conflicts bring into sharp relief the need for greater moral and technological control over these weapon systems. So the need for reconceptualization of international humanitarian law and human leadership role is therefore direr than ever before in future conflicts. Now, what are those obstacles to addressing these problems? The two main obstacles to my reckoning are the global power competition and the military-industrial complex. The two feed off one another and are undergirded by neocon ideology and privileges that privileges conflict and competition as currencies of global power instead of trade, connectivity, and economic partnerships. Now let's have a look on this quote by George Kennan, which is so germane even today. Were the Soviet Union to sink tomorrow under the waters of the ocean, the American military-industrial complex would have to remain substantially unchanged until some other adversary could be invented. Anything else would be an unacceptable shock to the American economy. He said this thing some time back, still relevant today. Now, coming quickly to China as a rising power, emerging as the biggest challenge to the United States' global dominance, with its information revolution fully fructified and its economic appetite unrequited, it is a civilization on the upswing. Would it be wise then to seek a balance of power accommodation with such a rising power, or to enter into a self-enervating contentment bout with it? Should the world not jettison the anachronistic military alliance such as NATO that fuel insecurities and huge economic alliance instead? Now, we quote Kissinger, the world must understand the historically grounded legitimate security concerns of Russia, and even if it entails keeping the Ukraine out of pale of NATO. He came up with a lot of stick for this. He gave this prescription that Ukraine should live with some loss of territory in the larger interest of global peace, but it didn't come to pass. Now, the Chinese forays into the economic realm, evidenced by their global reach, have become a fact of life and an idea whose time has come. Economic alliances like RCEP and connectivity projects like BRI are far more attractive to developing nations than the security-centric alliances like Quad and AUKUS. The trade volume of $615 billion between United States and China is the leaven that binds the two global powers into an economic interdependence. The future of the new world order hinges on that interdependence. In this interdependence lie the seeds of success of the future liberal international order, and it is the responsibility of the United States to save the new world order from a confrontational fate. The weakening of the state-based international system because of the inability of international peace organizations like United Nations to broker peace between existing and emerging global power bodes ill for world peace. What then is the way ahead? To conclude, business as usual will yield history as usual. So the way ahead in this competition-dominated Hobbesian world is a Kantian peace through cooperation, consensus, and co-option, which should be based on the strength of international institutions that promote a just and equitable international order. Ladies and gentlemen, finding that order is the pearl of high price that we all need to chase, and we owe it to 8 billion inhabitants of this planet that we call home. I'll stop here and look forward to the question and answer session. Thank you.